Good morning. Today we look at chapters 4 through 6 of Deuteronomy, according to BibleGateway.com. And today it's Jim's birthday in Fargo, so happy birthday, and thanks to you and to everybody for tuning in. I greatly appreciate that. Cheryl, I just talked last night and visit with others too. That I'm very thankful for all of you that tune in on a regular basis, and those of you that tune in once in a while as well. As we look at these chapters today, chapter 4 is the wrap-up of Moses' first speech to the Israelites. And, it starts with, "So now Israel, give heed to the statutes and ordinances that I am teaching you to observe." And that's one of the important things, teaching you to observe. Moses got the word from God. He responded and told it to the people. And then they were to teach it, and they were to live it, and they were to remember it. And in verse 6, I have underlined where Moses says, he's talking about the people, and he says, "Surely those other nations that look at us will say this, surely this great nation is a wise and discerning people." And, God had said to the people, "I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God. And you will be a light to the nations, a lamp unto the Gentiles." And so it was always God's intent that this nation of Israel would be his people. They would follow his laws. They would be examples for others, so that other nations would see the blessings that the Israelites got. And we can see that, as the Israelites conquer the promised land, other nations fear them. And God is with them. And so it's so that, so Moses is reminding them that, God chose you to be a light to the nations, so that others will look at you and say, "Man, we want to worship that same God." And I think that that's an important thing for us to think about as well, that, that we are to live our lives so that other people can see God in and through us. And sometimes we do okay at it, and sometimes we kind of flunk, just like the Israelites do so often. Verse 9, "Take care and watch yourselves closely, so as to neither forget the things that your eyes have seen, nor to let them slip from your mind." Remember, teach them, make them known to your children and your children's children. And this is one of the most important things that we can do as adults, parents, grandparents, friends and neighbors, is to teach our children, our children's children, our neighbors' children. And it reminds me of visiting with my classmate Jimmy about this Uncle Shao that, was teaching the kids in the neighborhood about God and about Jesus. And but it is what we are to do, is to teach and to teach others that way. Verse 23, Moses says, "Be careful not to forget the covenant that the Lord your God has made with you. Don't make idols for yourselves." And then verse 25, "When you have children and children's children and become complacent," you forget about it. You become complacent and you forget about God. Don't do that. Don't become complacent. Don't just say, "I got it." But remember that you need to work at it, and that God is there watching and teaching. And so then verse 44, this is the law that Moses set before the Israelites. It's, he had set the first 3 sanctuary cities, or the safety cities for those that unintentionally killed somebody, and they're getting ready to move into the promised land. Chapter 5, begins Moses' second speech, and there was probably a little bit of time between them, but chapter 5 virtually is the retelling of the 10 Commandments, and and God, he's saying, "Hear, O Israel, the statutes and ordinances, that the Lord God made a covenant with us at Horeb, at that mountain, and he made this covenant, and all of us are alive today." And then he goes on with the 10 Commandments. "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt." That's a reminder. Who is God? He is the one that brought us out of captivity. you shall have no other gods, and that just goes back to, don't become complacent and start worshiping other things, as in chapter 4 he said. And he goes on and, observe the Sabbath day, keep it holy, to take that time for God. And then verse 16 is honor your father and your mother. This is the command with a promise. Honor your father and your mother, so that the Lord your God commanded you, so that your days may be long in the land that you inherit, and goes on that way. And we can, the first giving of the 10 Commandments was in Exodus 20. And those were the first tablets that then were, broken at the foot of the calf, and got the second stones. But so Moses, in his speech, as the people are ready to go into Israel, is reminding them of, 40 years ago, 39 years ago, that, God gave us these commands. And he's reminding them too that there were times that God spoke that all of the people heard. And the people were so intimidated by that they said to Moses, we don't want to hear God anymore. You go and talk to God, and then you come and tell us. And so Moses reminds them of that as well. The last couple verses in chapter 5, you must therefore be careful to do as the Lord your God commands. You shall not turn to the right or to the left. You must follow exactly what it is that the Lord has commanded you, so that you may live, and that it may go well with you, and that you may live long in the land that God has promised. And we know that, the Israelites didn't live in that promised land as a free people forever, because they sinned. And when Jesus came, they were, under the authority of the Roman government. And so they lived in the land, but they didn't live in that land, forever and ever. I mean, there were many years that there was no nation of Israel. It was reestablished after World War II. Chapter 6 talks that this is the command, the statutes, the ordinances that the Lord your God has charged me to teach to you, so that you and your children may fear and respect the Lord your God all the days, and that you may follow his decrees and commands. And in verse 4, hear, O Israel, the Lord is your God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all your soul, with all of your mind. And so this is the first and greatest command that we hear, when Jesus asks, when the rich young ruler asks, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And what are the commands? Well, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and all your mind. And the second like it, that isn't said here, but the second like, love your neighbor as yourself. But it's, to keep these words, recite them to your children, talk about them. So Moses reminds them again, teach your children about God. And it's so important that we teach them about God, because if we don't, Satan and the world will teach them a lot of other things. And if we as parents, as grandparents, as members of the community, as members of the church say that, well, we'll let them decide when they get older. If they get to be 25 years old and have never been taught about God, why would they all of a sudden just say, hey, I really need, some of them will be inquisitive, yes. But we need to teach them. And some people may say, well, that's brainwashing them to teach them at a young age. Well, we teach them to wash their hands, we teach them to eat dinner, we teach them many things. Why not teach them about this God who loves us and is filled with grace and mercy in all those things? Verse 12, take care that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. And again, that reminder, who is the Lord? He's the one who freed us from slavery, from all those years of captivity. And granted, now those that were adults over 20 years of age when they left Egypt, after these 40 years, there are none of them going to get to the promised land, but their children have been taught all of those years of what that is. And then verse 14, again, reminder, do not follow other gods, and it's one of the things that God is most adamant about, You know, the first commandment, I am the Lord your God. Second, do not have any other gods. You know, don't begin to worship other things, you know. And it's hard to have God as number one. I mean, you know, we get wrapped up with ourselves and our children and everything that's going on, and it's hard sometimes to remember that. But then verse 20, when your children ask in times to come, what is the meaning of these decrees and statutes? And it's like on the Passover meal, you know, the youngest child asks the question as the family, sits down to celebrate and remember the Passover. And so we teach our children and remind them, I'm going to sneeze, I think. I better quit before I get too involved with those. Sometimes I get several in a row. But throughout this book of Deuteronomy, Moses is speaking to the people, reminding them of God's laws and of God's love and the importance, of teaching our children about this loving and gracious God.